Steve, you mentioned Togiai from Idaho, which Urban Meyer mentioned in a news conference a few weeks ago that he thought he had made maybe one other trip to Idaho when he was at Utah, but that's a rare one because if you look at these states, Texas, California, Florida, I saw a statistic where they make up almost 40% of the elite 300 in the country. And then, of course, Georgia, Ohio, Pennsylvania chime in. But if you go to Idaho, if you see the listings of players, and you know this better than I do, most of the pages of the top states have 100 players listed. And it's not that they don't have more high school football players that have rankings than that. They just stop at 100. But if you go to a state like Idaho, they only have like 9 kids that rate as 2 stars even. So to get a kid like that is pretty rare. You mentioned Rhode Island, and it's funny. I was just looking at this last night. They have 1 kid on the board. That means only 1 kid rates anywhere above a 2-star, I believe. And it's the kid that Urban Meyer is targeting for 2019. And then
it is kind of a crazy phenomenon when you think about the links you have to go to find talent. Ohio State's taking guys from Utah. Brandon Bowen, who ended up starting for Ohio State this year, is from the state of Utah. And I think everybody knew coming out of high school he was a quality prospect. Nevada, obviously, with Bishop Gorman, is starting to become a hotbed. The Buckeyes took Haskell Garrett and Tate Martell out of there last year. Ohio State's doing a lot more damage in the state of Georgia, and I think it was easier, obviously, to do that damage, getting a guy like a Raekwon McMillan, a Von Bell, some of the guys that they've signed out of Georgia in years past when Georgia was down. They not necessarily were down, they just were not on top of their game. It looks like now Kirby Small is going to have them back recruiting some of the top players in Georgia, top players nationally, going to play for a national contender at Georgia. So Urban Meyer he'll look under every rock. I mean, he is tireless with this. As we said, the machinery and the connectivity, Mark, as we've talked on this before about the difference in recruiting now versus 20 years ago. Everybody's videotape is on Huddle or online on YouTube. So there are very few hidden gems out there, and a lot of these kids do get the opportunity to come cross country in the summertime and go to summer camps. They've had kids from California, Florida, Georgia, all over the place come in and visit Ohio State for their summer camps. So the connectivity is there, and if you can play, these college recruiters, the machinery that they have, they'll find you.
Xavier Truss is the name of the player we're referring to out of Warwick, Rhode Island. Yep. And to be the only player in the state to even make it on the board and to be a 4-star, it fascinates me, the level of scouting that has to be done for a player at the offensive tackle position who's just completed his junior season of high school football. Yeah. And to rate him against states that have hundreds of players that would rate 2-star and above, and to be able to put him on the board as a 4-star, to have just the acumen to look at his play regardless of the level of competition around him and say that kid's a 4-star, kind of fascinates me. And speaking of 2019, right there in the great state of Ohio, the #1 player recently named.
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise, I think, when it came out. But Zach Harrison, he's 6'6", 250-pound defensive end from Olentangy, Orange. It's Delaware County, which is just north of Columbus, which for a long time has been one of the fastest growing counties in the entire country, with people moving to the suburbs, maybe out of the city of Columbus. Delaware is the county seat. Powell is the town that he lives in, and he attends a high school, Olentangy Orange. Olentangy has several high schools. They have Olentangy High School, they have Olentangy Liberty, and Olentangy Orange. So one school district in that growing community has mushroomed and split off into 3 high schools, and all of them, given on a year-in, year-out basis, are competitive in a lot of the sports. And Zach Harrison, just a freak. I mean, a guy at that size, as we talked about, he went down to the U.S. Army All-American Combine that they had the day before the game down there in January. And I believe he was clocked at 4.62 seconds in the 40, which is just outstanding for a guy his size. Steve Wiltfong from our staff did a great feature on him. His coach, Zeb Schroeder, talked about how 2 or 3 years ago when he was a freshman, he struggled. His feet were so big, he struggled doing what they call lunges, which is kind of an agility thing, to get the guy's footwork and everything going. And how, now today he has just blossomed into a great prospect. I think Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Alabama, those are probably 4 of the top schools that are already involved. James Franklin has been to the school. Urban Meyer has been to the school. Jim Harbaugh has been to the school. So it's going to be a great recruiting battle for Zach Harrison. In terms of Central Ohio, it's hard to think about how many guys have been in that rarefied air as a top 5 or top 10 prospect. Andy Katzenmoyer, way back when in 1996, was probably a national top 10 prospect, and he was from a school just south of there in Westerville South High School, which is just across the county line in Franklin County, outside Columbus. So, I know that Terrell Pryor from Pennsylvania was an Ohio State player who a lot of people regarded as a #1 prospect nationally. Braxton Miller was up there way on the list from down in the Dayton area. I'm going to have to do some research to see, guys in the top 5 or 6 that Ohio State has gotten, or guys from Ohio who've been that highly rated, because it's been pretty rare over the years. As you talked about, Florida's the hotbed, California is the hotbed, not so much Ohio. Ohio's in that next tier. But for them to have the #1 player in the country, he must have really done something special when he was down there for the Army All-American Combine.
All right, everyone, as you get set for National Signing Day, and keep in mind about 10 to 15% of the guys are still on the board, and leave a little higher percentage for the elite players, the top 300. You got to follow them on 247 Sports. Also, Steve Hellwagon as the Big Ten senior writer there, and at Bucknuts as well. Steve, we always appreciate the insight and the information. It is a good discussion.
Yep. No problem, Mark. Anytime.